Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown. Joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. James, how you doing, mate?
Doing well today. Was sick a bit over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but feeling better today, fortunately. Yeah. But feeling good now, physically anyway, and ready to discuss what has been the never-ending cinema that is Manchester United,
Yes.
for better or worse. It never fails to. It's never boring. I put it that way.
Obviously, a lot happened over the weekend. United's disappointing defeat, of course, at home to Forest, and also, of course, the Dan Ashworth situation, which is really came out of the blue. Wasn't expecting that, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about INEOS. We'll talk about what responsibility they bear, whether it's a positive or a negative, amongst a number of other things. We'll talk about the game first, James, then we'll get to the news. Um, Disappointing result, 3-2, of course, at home to Forest. Game that United were expected to win, especially on the back of the Arsenal defeat. It felt like the defeat at Arsenal was a bit of a reset in the sense that what we saw second half at Arsenal and the 90 minutes against Forest was very reminiscent of what we've seen under the last 2 years.
Yeah, it was. It was tricky, and in some respects, there's similar things that are showing up, and definitely some general differences. And you put out a really good take on this, obviously, because the last thing that anybody should be discussing at this point in time, is Amorim and how or whether he's responsible for losses or things like that, because it's not really the phase of the job that he's in right now. And he said it himself, right? That the storm's coming. We're going to be taking hits soon. After the win against Everton, he was like, I don't know about this, because I think he's well aware of the deficiencies in the team. And I thought, things like the win at Everton were probably um, not congruent with where United are at as a team, right? Sometimes you get a little bit of a feel good factor. You get those wins, you get some encouragement, and confidence can take you very far in a lot of ways, but it doesn't necessarily represent where you are as a team. And also sometimes the losses don't too, rather, and I think that what we learned from Forest was not necessarily, I would say, things we didn't know, but we're seeing the deficiencies show up a little more stark in certain areas of the pitch. And I think the first 45, interestingly enough, were actually really good. United concede off a set piece right off the bat. Terrible, right? We know that that's something that is a problem that has been discussed, that was abused by Arsenal, that they need to improve. The team is somewhat small in general. They're not that combative as they need to be. We know that affects you on set pieces. And then it was mentioned by some players, that they have a new set piece coach and they've got to figure it out. So there's probably a little bit of turmoil and stuff happening there too. The rest of that first half I thought was actually really good in some respects. In the overall performance, the goal that they scored was really nice. Again, one of those well-worked goals that is something that comes not off the cuff, but off of pattern training and things like that. You want to see more and more of that. And the two goals they can then concede were just, to me, complete meltdowns by a couple of individuals involved in the situation. And I will say I can forgive Onana making a mistake on the goal, because I think it was a pretty big mistake, right? That's a shot he should be saving. I can forgive that. It happens. He's been really good this season. He made a mistake on that shot. It does happen to even the best of keepers, but a tough one. The situation resulting in that shot happening in the first place is not forgivable. You can't be doing flicks in your own half, turning it over when your center back is running forward. We've seen those kind of things before. Those risky behaviors right in the middle of the pitch are not acceptable. They're things that they want to get out of the action that you just cannot do in a game. And And the third goal I thought was one of the most it was really, really cowardly by a couple of players in the back line who completely backed out of making any sort of challenge, of making any sort of attempt on the ball, of making any sort of attempt to play a player. And you can see that, where teams are targeting in that respect, where they're seeing a lack of combativeness, a lack of fight. I thought they tried after that to get back into the game, got another goal out of it. Not there in creating, but it was a lot more in that respect what I expected. A team that's been on the counter for 6 years, 78% possession, conceding on a few disastrous mistakes and failing to win. This is going to take time to become a team that has 78% possession and creates chances and scores goals and dominates game and doesn't make mistakes. It's going to take time to do that. And it's a big change from the type of play we've been seeing.
Yeah, look, so the point I was making was Amorim is in the find out stage of his job. Right?
Yep.
So you ask questions of players, you don't get answers to these questions in the manager's office or on the training ground. You get answers to these questions by what you do on a football pitch, right? And there's only one way to find out if somebody can do something, and that is, you have to put them in the ultimate, moment of truth in the ring or the octagon or this is where all answers are given.
Of course.
Right?
Yep.
And when you find out that they can't, it's unfortunately typically always through consequential mistakes or defeats.
Sure.
But those defeats are informative about what changes need to take place. We haven't seen Amorim's solutions yet because he's still trying to understand the problem.
Yeah, that was game 5, right? Total.
Yeah,
So,
especially when you're rotating the squad, you can't make those decisions on a player on one game or 2 games. Regardless, you could have a player play exceptionally well for 2 games, and that could be misleading, or have 2 poor games, and that can be misleading. So you have to try to get some type of volume work data that makes a logical inference and says, okay, this, before you can make a decision on a player. This guy came in November and didn't have a transfer window, didn't have a preseason. So he's been thrown right at the deep end at a mediocre football team where he's trying to find out why did they make mistakes that nobody else makes in the league week in, week out. Why can't they do the basics? Well, you said concerned me because I've seen this before. The Chris Wood goal happens for the same reason the goal happens off the corner. For the same reason the Brentford goal happens off the corner. For the same reason the Arsenal goals are happening off corners. There's no intensity to defend. But when you were trying to do zonal marking, or even man-to-man, but zonal, you need someone who takes responsibility and organizes. You need someone that's constantly communicating, this is your job, go here, go here, go here, especially when you are trying to, implement new ideas. This is maybe one area where I think Amorim really needs to get a settled back 5 where 3 he wants to do, because it's constantly rotating. I don't think helps. But I've seen this too many times at United where when they concede a goal, for those that are watching this will see, but you'll get the message. This is the response. Turn around, walk away. There's no bollockings. There's no one taking responsibility. What I see is a bunch of players blaming everybody else. Chris Wood is about who wants it most. The Arsenal goals are about who wants it most. Once that ball leaves the ground, it's a 50-50. Now, who wants the ball most? The person that wants it most is the person who's going to win it. This is simple as that.
It is.
Things don't change in football. So, yes, there are subtle differences, there are complexities that change, but ultimately, I don't care what instructions you give someone, what tactics you give someone, they're all predicated on the fact that a player or an athlete goes out and executes with 100% intensity, because if a human being doesn't do that, everything else is irrelevant. These are all little subtle things that will help you, but they will never compensate for someone that isn't giving you the basics. And that's a big, big question, or that's an uncomfortable answer for Amorim. Because that is, I don't want to single Dalloway because he wasn't the only one. But that first goal, he's in the corner. He's in no man's land, James. What is
Yes.
he doing? And it was very reminiscent of what happened against Brentford. The lid comes off. It's corner comes in, bang, corner to the near post, and it's a token effort.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to get to the ball, and if I don't, who else can I blame it on? It's close.
Yep.
Sandro Martinez, similar.
Yeah, he watched the ball go right in by him. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the third one, I thought he could have done better. If you're the Sandro Martinez at the back post, you're looking, if this ball loops over, I'm clearing it. Right? I mean, you anyone that's played football knows where that header's going.
Mm.
Right? That header's going back across the keeper.
Yep. Always. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Martinez has time to watch it. And Dallow's attempt to close the cross down was really terrible.
He doesn't usually ever close the cross down. It's one of my biggest complaints. It's
the cross is coming into the box with not having enough pressure. It's like,
yep.
This is so frustrating.
Yeah, those are things that
It's that Amorim is. I mean, he obviously knows more about football than most of us, so he's going to know what we can see. The question comes with the solutions. What does he do to fix these, and what ability does he have to fix these? But you saw even where young Garnacho coming off. Look, it's understandable to be disappointed. That happens, right? I don't know many footballers that are particularly thrilled about coming off, but everyone's had to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Boylan get dropped after scoring 2. Xerxes get dropped after scoring 2. Rashford get dropped after scoring 2. They've all been hauled off in games. Casemiro, when was the last time Casemiro played? So he has to accept that. And behaving like he's bigger than the problem, or he's bigger than the club, that the problem is beneath him, is not a good look. And Amorim is going to take a kid aside and say, look, respect the fact you're disappointed. That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's possible he's disappointed with the performance and the result, okay. But, a week ago we had a national news story on how Marcus Rashford took his gloves off.
Yep.
On the pitch, and now, this is the type of thing that I feel like United have to, because it doesn't look like it's a team.
Yeah.
So, James, the Amorim manager bounce is well and truly over, and the stark reality of what he's faced with is staring him in the face right now, which is in some sense a healthy thing.
Correct. Yeah. Well, and bearing in mind it's never about the bounce, right? The bounce can fool you. The bounce is always temporary. It's always temporary. It's always there. And when, like he said, he's taking the right attitude towards this. If we don't suffer a bit now, we'll be back in the same place in a year. And so, I think the losses are more instructive in a lot of ways than the gains. The problem with players that you can't trust, that he will have in the short term, and why he really, it's almost a free hit the entire season in some respect for Amorim, is if he can set the team up, the tactics up, the way of playing up to where it becomes very, very obvious that it is really and truly down to those players that cannot be trusted, then the only answer for that is in the transfer market, because it can be very difficult to fix that. It can be very difficult to correct that, to make it work 100%. To get a player to be trusted mid-season that is not performing, that is not putting it in 100%. Maybe you can. That'll be a test of him, of who can he get going, who's not going now, who's not really doing it. But in a lot of ways, if he can't, the only solution is in the market for that, is selling and buying players. And he's not going to have much in January, maybe a little. And you have to wait till summer, and he hasn't had a window. And so in that respect, that's why it's a little bit of like, this is the job for this year, is figure that out. Who can you sell? Who do you not want? Who can you not rely on? Who isn't going to make it under you? Who can you motivate and get going? And I think that a lot of the rotation has been down to that as well, right? He wants to see who can he get, kick up their ass and get them performing on the pitch, even if they haven't deserved to start, based on other things. Because like you said, it's not just about training. It's what happens there during that moment and when they're playing is the real test of it. And that's what he's going to want to see out of them. I'm encouraged that they are doing, that one half of the job. I think is progressing quite well tactically, the system, these types of things. You can see it. They're learning it. They're carrying it out. They're doing it. I think you see improvement in the type of play, and an attempt at least for United to move towards a very, very potentially successful style of football or game model or what have you. And that will isolate the people who can't or won't do it. And I think it's becoming clear game by game who those are. But then the biggest test is, we talked about this beforehand when we were talking about who should United get as a coach, right? About, is it just a tactics guy? Is it some like genius, and this ties into the Dan Ashworth discussion that we'll have in a minute. Or is it about the man management aspect? And I think we both came to the conclusion, I flip-flopped a few times, but in the end, I think I agreed with you quite strongly that the biggest factor in the success of the next manager will be, and really any manager, is that. Can you motivate? Can you encourage? Can you figure out who's got it and who doesn't? Get some players going, all of that aspects. Now, these are supposedly Ruben Amorim's strengths. And so that is going to be the major test of him, because I think the system is coming along. But it's, can you get the players performing, motivated within that system? And are you able then to, and on the club, it's, are you able to get rid of the ones who won't and replace them if they won't do it? And that's where it's very much the whole club has to be in alignment, because otherwise you're never going to solve these problems.
Absolutely. And this is where, look, Amorim can only enforce standards and principles that the club holds firm to. And again, like we said, this will tie into the Amorim thing. We'll get to this when we're done. The Ashworth thing, sorry.
Yep.
So, for a lot of those players, they've been on this treadmill a while.
Mm-hmm.
So they've heard all this rhetoric, they've seen it all before, and it ends up in exactly the same way. It's difficult to overcome that psychologically, because once you adopt that, human beings then start modifying their behavior, accepting that is a reality.
Yep.
And then you start developing coping mechanisms for. It's really difficult to work that out of the human psyche and say that these problems don't exist anymore, and now we need to develop. You can do that if you have some sort of intervention when these things first happen. But once you learn to deal with toxicity in a negative environment, and you amend your behavior and your sensitivity levels and how you cope with it, and it starts becoming part of your personality. So now, how do you get players? This is like when you're in a toxic relationship with someone. You start understanding people's triggers. You start understanding how to avoid certain things. And eventually you become that person. And then you meet someone healthy, and it's very difficult to work those out of your behaviors, because you know how they're influencing you. You're doing certain things that aren't obvious to you, and I think this is what's very, very difficult to do. This is like when we were talking about when you take over a company. Sometimes you have to have a change of personnel, because it's really difficult to get people who've had working habits based on certain reward and consequence structure to then completely change and embrace positivity, because that attracts a certain type of person and repels a different type of person. So for United, you look at that, their relied position is an abomination. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
We're sitting here in December, James, and they're 13th, and that is an accurate reflection of where United are.
Yeah. Now it's close to 6th, but at the same time, that's still an accurate reflection. That means there's a lot of teams on the same level here, and we're in that mid-table.
Shouldn't be. Even if we're in 6th, that's still it's a mid-table position.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're mid-table in the Europa Conference League, where they were before, and you're looking at this is indicative of where United are at.
Mm-hmm.
They're a football team that sometimes has the ability to beat people, but has the ability to lose against anyone. Now, I want to read a stat to you, because this is courtesy of The Athletic. And this is absolutely astonishing stats. I had the question if it was accurate or not. This is genuinely hard to believe. There's two of them here, but Man United have now conceded 7 goals from corners in the Premier League this season, with no team letting in more. They've also conceded a greater proportion of goals from set pieces overall, 50% than any other team. Now, defending set pieces is not particularly complicated. You don't need to be a touch. You don't need to be Lionel Messi. You just need to be physical, get a head on the ball, and be organized, right? When a manager takes over a team trying to save them from relegation, these are the first things they fix because they're the easiest. Let's be dangerous on set pieces. Let's not concede from set pieces. And set pieces are the domain of a team that don't have the technical ability to cut you open. Right? Ireland national team, what did we do? You on set pieces, long throws, corners, because that's the leveler.
For sure. It's always been. Yeah.
Right? I can't beat you with technique on the ground, so we're going to muscle you. We're going to want this. That is an indictment on Manchester United's desire more than the organization for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it really is. And it 100% is. There's really no excuse in that respect. And I do think you can see the difference between some players and others on the pitch pretty regularly and pretty easily, especially in that Forest game. And it's something that will come forward. But this is the biggest challenge without a window is how you solve this.
Do you want to name them?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, rather than getting too negative on a few people, I would say I was going to ask you what you thought about this because I think it's a tricky question. But if you had to ask me if there were 3 players who I thought played up to the level of the intensity required on a regular basis that I've seen so far since Amorim has come in, I would give you Manuel Ugarte as number 1. Because he's been probably the best performer consistently since Amorim's come in, which is no surprise, but his intensity is always there. The effort is always there. The energy is always there. That's a baseline thing that you can expect. I thought Kobbie Mainoo worked really hard. I think he always tends to. I don't really ever see him lacking or slacking in that respect. And I think that takes him a long way towards the type of player that he is and can be. And then I would say Amad Diallo. And besides those 3, I'm not sure that I've seen 100% every game out of anybody. I wouldn't mark too much against someone like Mazraoui. I think falls under that category too. I should say though he didn't start, so I wasn't thinking of him in the last game. I think De Ligt has been pretty good on this front, though. On set pieces, I have seen him sitting and ball watching a bit and being too passive, and sometimes on the ball. It's been called out twice now by Amorim. Him not being brave, him not taking more risks, him not doing some of the things he needs to do, which will come with time. I think he's defended with intensity at a lot of good moments. But honestly, those 4, Mazraoui, Amad, Kobbie, and Ugarte are probably the only 4 players I would say that I haven't seen, give up, throw hands up, fall apart when it mattered. And at every moment, I would have confidence in them to at least be putting in what they need to from the players that have played pretty regularly over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to make a decision on players' commitment by decision making because
correct. Yeah,
one of the issues for me, James, is when you aren't confident, you make different decisions.
For sure.
You're overly careful with passes. You don't take risks. You don't trust.
And I understand that with De Ligt. That's why I give him a little bit of a pass on that. Yeah.
But I'm also going to try to apply this to Garnacho because he's taken a lot of criticism for his decision making. But this is something that happens with players when they're not confident.
Mm-hmm.
Is that they try to be over careful with finishes. Nothing becomes instinctive. Everything becomes computational routine. And the genius of a footballer is the parts that aren't an automaticity. They aren't just a routine. That have subtlety. That have that have a skill level to them that is not just rinse and repeat.
Yep.
So for me, stat comes out whenever players are confident. But this is part of the problem with trying to implement a playing style and a formation when players aren't confident. You can't do it losing games.
Yep.
This is one of the reasons why in Ten Hag's first season, United had an identity and then it disappeared. You cannot implement a playing style when players are losing games of football, because if players are human beings, so they will revert back to the basics.
Yep.
Whether they're confident or not, they know they can control a ball and pass it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The human brain is complex. Why is an away record far worse than a home record? It can't just be the crowd. There has to be something psychological going on there. So that is a really difficult thing to fix, and that's the issue for Amorim. If Amorim is going to get any momentum, he has to do it with confident footballers, but he has to do it with footballers that believe that they can be successful, that believe in what he's telling them, that trust, respect, all those issues. And for Amorim to get that, he's also going to need more help from the people above him.
Yep.
Because and I want to get into that, because to me, they haven't helped him either. And I'll extrapolate on it a little bit, but to finish up on the game, really disappointing results.
Yep.
I would have added Onana onto that list of someone who's been exceptional.
Sure. I forget the keeper sometimes, but Onana deserves it. Besides the mistake, which it does happen to keepers, he's been really good, good for us. Yeah.
And yes, he made an inexplicable mistake. One thing about him is he's a guy that never needs to be told he made a mistake.
Yeah.
So,
he knows.
But ultimately, even if he hadn't of, I don't know if he would have won that game. There was far bigger issues for me that were concerning. That really, when we start Amorim executing solutions, then we can have a proper judgment and say, okay, because as we said, this is, even if he wins games right now, James, and to be fair, he was one of the ones that said that about Bodo Glimt, Everton. We should beat Bodo more. Everton deserve more. Don't just judge the result, the performance.
Yeah.
He said that when they were winning.
Yeah.
And I mean, when nervousness creeps into a team, James, the only way you get that out is by winning games. You see it today. And so he has a big challenge.
It's insidious. It's very insidious. These
how
things.
the human brain works.
Yep.
And the thing is that once it goes through a team, whether if it's positive, the collective impact of a positive atmosphere lifts everyone quickly. But the collective negative consequence of nervousness, like a virus, goes right through the team, especially if it hits leaders. All right, Mr. Ashworth. So this caught me by surprise yesterday, and I'll be totally honest, I hadn't really heard anything about Dan Ashworth that would make me feel that something like this was remotely close. Now, the stuff that's come out afterwards is interesting. So one of the things that we had said before on this podcast is this is the first time United are going to have someone whose job depends on the success of the manager and recruitment. So they're being held accountable for their job. It appears that Dan Ashworth was one of the voices that wanted to keep Ten Hag over the summer. And there are certain things within that you can raise question marks, but shouldn't there be question marks over the guy that picked Dan Ashworth, who was certain of his suitability,
100%.
certain of his attributes, but didn't do enough due diligence on the fact that he wasn't a transfer guru? How is that not feeling in recruitment?
Yeah, it sure is. Look, there's the thing that I think that's important here too is to gather that, I think there's a couple of aspects to this, because there's a whole lot that I've kind of discovered about this from talking to people, and obviously, historically, just being upfront with this, most of this is going to come from one side. This is not coming from Dan Ashworth's side of the equation, right? At the same time, I think it is also important to preface it with that sometimes when like a relationship or something breaks down, it doesn't have to be someone's fault. There is a matter of, it just not being the right thing for both parties can be correct as well. And I think a lot of it comes down to that. And that's down to due diligence ahead of time, right? It doesn't necessarily mean on the job someone has failed. There was a really interesting thing that I realized a few months ago, which is that in Dan Ashworth's entire career, he's never sacked a manager. Do you know that? Not once has he ever sacked a manager. When he joined Brighton, they were already, Tony Bloom was already replacing Chris Hughton, who was the manager at the time when Dan Ashworth joined, and Dan Ashworth actually wanted to keep him at the time. And Tony Bloom wanted to replace him and get someone, and it actually worked out really well based on what Tony Bloom wanted to do. But Dan Ashworth has never sacked a manager. He's always wanted to give him more time. He's always been very, very patient in that respect. Now, you would sit there and wonder, okay, if that's the case, then how the hell did he get the job in the first place, right? That is obviously the first kind of mistake here, because INEOS had decided Ten Hag wasn't the guy before they even made it in the door, okay? And I shared that many, many times last year that was the case, and now it's all kind of fully coming to a head. But they wanted or intended to have Dan Ashworth be the guy who makes that decision and make the call, right? They were worried about making too many decisions themselves, what have you. But clearly they didn't get it right in the appointment of Dan Ashworth, that he was not the right guy for them. It is totally accurate that he wanted to give Ten Hag more time. And when it really came to a head, even during the first international break, things were already going poorly. And they were already thinking, like, if they've already made their minds up in this case, right, INEOS, and saying, we have huge doubts about Ten Hag, but you've convinced us to keep him for longer. And then you start the season and it goes to shit immediately. You're kind of screwed at that point in time. It's just a reality, because their perception, they're already being proven right in their eyes on their view of the manager at that point in time. And if you don't back that and then say, let's fix it now and get somebody else in immediately, then you're in trouble. And during the October, I think it was, international break, they got together again on this, and it was looking bad. And Sir Jim's view is essentially, someone has to fix this, or I have to. And it was Omar who stepped up, started looking at managers, started making calls, getting in touch with people, and Dan Ashworth, who in their eyes didn't. The minute somebody above you starts doing your job, you're done. It's over. You're gone, right? You're screwed. Any job you're at, if someone starts doing your job, start printing your resume and sending it out to people, because you're about to be fired 100% every single time. It is a guarantee. So right or wrong, they view Omar was very decisive on this front, saying, look, fine, I'm going to take responsibility for this and fix it and go get us a manager. And not, look, to be fair, I think you'd have a lot of agreement with Omar and INEOS on this, because you look at the names that Dan Ashworth is putting forward, and the names that we discussed on this podcast as incredibly uninspiring. Your Graham Potters, your Thomas Franks, your.
What did you expect him with Dan Ashworth, that he was going to recommend Zidane?
Well, that was a terrible look
from Brighton and Newcastle, and he's a Brighton and Newcastle manager. What do you expect?
Exactly. Look, Thomas Frank's a good manager. He's doing well this year as well. But again, we're going to fight about this again. No, he's a good manager. But agreed. Look, Sir Jim shared the same view as you, and Omar shared the same view as you. He wasn't this up and coming, has actually done some shit manager that they wanted, right? And an inspiring choice, which I think Amorim is, winning titles and another, and doing all that. But but correct. Look, he came in and it was like, most of our watchers aren't Americans. They aren't NFL fans, right? But you might remember this clip from the 90s from a Vikings coach where he just kept saying they are who we thought they were, like over and over in a thing. Maybe it's a Colts coach, one of those. And I always think of that when it's something like this. It's like you hire a guy and he comes in and does exactly what he was doing before, and you're like confused that they're not changing. And people do this in relationships. They hire someone and they think they get with somebody, they get in a relationship, they think the other person's going to change. No, they're not. You get in a relationship with someone for who they are, not for who you want them to be. And it's the same for players, and it's the same for coaches, and it's the same for businesses and hiring and any of that. You get someone in for who they are, not who you want them to be. Omar at least has experience at a top level club. It makes sense why he thinks the way that he does. Dan Ashworth thinks like a mid-table director of football, and that's what he is. And that's how he acted. And they screwed up hiring him. I would say that they make mistakes. I think the positive of it is doing it this quickly and not sticking with it, because you can get into that sunk cost and just stick with it forever just because you've already made that mistake.
But let me ask you this, right?
Yeah.
How does Dan Ashworth talk the whole football club into keeping out Ten Hag?
I mean, I guess it depends, right? Like if you
boss, right? So how does he talk his boss and the whole football club? There's diversity viewpoint on that board. It's comprised of a lot of professionals. How does Dan Ashworth talk the whole football club into keep it? It can't just have been his decision.
Well, no, of course they all have to. Everybody has to have agreed, right? And so you can't. 100%. You cannot put all the blame on him, right? Look, it obviously that's a multifaceted thing, right? If you sit down with a discussion and someone convinces, what's that?
I'm sure they'll tell you it wasn't just the Ten Hag, and it wasn't. To be fair, I'm sure maybe he would have got away with that mistake if, James, as you know, you run companies right in Turkey.
Yep.
If you get fired, you said it perfectly just there. It's almost never the one major mistake that you make.
Yep.
It's always an accumulation of small things.
Yep.
Going on vacation or a holiday was the first day and the day. I mean, these are things that anyone with a functioning brain doesn't do.
And I want to comment on that real quick.
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Because remember Amorim said about the trip from Casemiro and Rashford. He said that it's the club's rule. He would prefer if they changed it. And you mentioned that he can only enforce what's there, right? And you take that comment and you take Ashworth going on holiday and you think, how would I put these words? There's complicit agreement here from Dan Ashworth that this is okay, that these types of holidays and vacations are okay, that seemingly don't match the view of Amorim and potentially others.
There's an implied consent. I mean, they are party to this.
Yep.
But here's the thing on that, James, right? I mean, these are things that are company policy on who can go where, what is not something that's nebulous. Yep. Any organization that's run exceptionally well has these things in black and white. This is where obviously there's a judgment issue here. Maybe it fell within the rules, but it just wasn't smart.
Right.
Then, of course, in the coverage, we heard about his attempt to bring in an analysis company, that Ratcliffe, I think, rightfully would have expected you bring that knowledge.
It's your job.
Right? I mean, if you're in a job, you do not find a million ways to render yourself meaningless, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't care if it's putting pencils in a box. Nobody can put these pencils in a box like me. Do not ever hire somebody else to come in here and do this for you at a fraction of the cost of me. I mean, that to me, I'm looking at that and going, And then I'm wondering how Eddie Howe ended up on the list when it was quite clear that
they didn't even get along. Yeah.
They get along, and Eddie Howe was more or less happy that he was leaving.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that, but none of those were Manchester United managers. But it all depends on what question he was being asked. Because to me, like we all know people made scapegoats when they get fired, right? They're responsible for everything, right?
Yeah.
Responsible for the French Revolution, everything, right? It's just we all do that, right? Everyone, the guy at the door gets the blame for everything. But this, considering the consequences of these decisions and the cost of them, this is really poor from INEOS.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this came a week after they announced the ticket price issue really poorly. So Amorim, like we said on this podcast last week, had to face protests in his first home game. Not okay. This, of course, is off the back of other questionable decisions that they've made.
Yep.
The Ferguson incident, to me, there's a right and wrong way to do things. And I can totally accept the fact that maybe it's time to move Alex Ferguson on as an ambassador, but I think there's a right and wrong way to do it. And I think he should have been given the opportunity to do that properly himself and not make it look like it was a result of financial,
waste,
necessity.
Yeah.
And then we're saying Ruben Amorim doesn't have the money in January to go out and get the players he badly needs for this football club to succeed on the field.
Yep.
If, as a consequence of decisions like this is where it does grate on me a bit. INEOS are going to make mistakes. That's a fact. They're not going to get everything right. We said that in the beginning, but this is a big one.
Yeah. And again, it is, and I'm trying to be balanced on it, because the fact of the matter is that, you know, the decision to hire Dan Ashworth was not made by Omar Barada, who's an experienced football person. It was made by Sir Dave Brailsford.
If Ratcliffe fired him,
Yeah.
would that undermine Barada? Sorry, carry on.
What's that? Sorry?
If Ratcliffe was the one that made the decision to fire Ashworth, does that undermine Barada?
I think it very much was in tandem, you know, and I think that I would be really, really surprised, especially, well, no, I won't say the next part, but I'd be really, really surprised if it wasn't. In fact, I'm quite positive it was very much in tandem. And I think, you know, Omar Barada knowingly started doing Ashworth's duties. And that is all you need to know. Like I said earlier, when someone above you starts taking your job, you're done. And Omar took Ashworth's job, right? Like in the real world, he took his job. He said, I'm going to do your job for you. And I'm going to go fly to Portugal, and I'm going to go meet with people, and I'm going to go get a manager. You know, Dan Ashworth.
Wasn't there lots of discussion over the summer about United not wanting to hire people until they knew exactly who they were working for? So if Barada had nothing to do with Ashworth, and we'd have to assume that was a Jim Ratcliffe hire. Now, remember, Ashworth and Brailsford are supposed to be very close.
Yes.
Does this now reflect...
Brailsford's on the board too, yeah.
So does this now reflect an issue between Ratcliffe in question and Brailsford's judgment?
Probably.
But if Barada didn't hire Ashworth or had no input in it, then the subsequent problems are entirely predictable. And anyone with a brain that's putting the management team together would know this, that we're not going to impose. So we need to know who hired Dan Ashworth, who fired him, okay? Because those are important questions that United fans need an answer to.
Yep.
Because we were told that everything was put on hold until, you know, Ashworth and Barada came into the football club, because whoever came would want to know who they work for. Well, how did we get that relationship wrong?
Yeah. Well, look, I can tell you with just some, like almost 100% certainty from my side of things, which I think is very correct on this, that the decision to hire Dan Ashworth as the main guy was made way before they even made contact with Omar Barada, by Dave Brailsford being close to him. You know, David Brailsford spent a lot of time in the first 6 months of United at United, right? He was there doing things all the time because he knew him.
But
he knew him via this.
For someone else, why wait until you get that guy in and then work your way down?
It's a mistake. Look, it's 100% a mistake. I'm just telling you that's what it was. You know, that was what it was. It was 100% a mistake, but that's what it was. You know, Jason Wilcox was made at the request of Omar Barada. We got stories about that because he knows him from his time at City. And that hiring, from all accounts, has worked out extremely well. They've been incredibly impressed with Jason Wilcox, with his assessment of things, with his with a lot of the suggestions that he's made, with a lot of the things that they've been getting from him.
Especially when boss is your ex-boss too.
Well, it helps, but to be fair, you know, he wins a lot of points because he was the guy supposed to deliver the Ten Hag assessment. He said sack him, right? That's what he said. Fact. It's just 100%. He said that, you know, and so when it doesn't work out, he wins the battle between Ashworth and him, right? If you're looking at it in that respect, on their opposing views on this, Wilcox comes out the clear winner in their eyes on this. But anyway, yeah. But look, part of the point is, yes, of course, there's nepotism in everything. There's familiarity with it, and maybe it's not nepotism, but obviously Omar Barada knows Wilcox, but that can be a good thing too, because he's a qualified individual who knows what he wants, and getting him in was good. Omar was in when they made a decision to hire Vivell. Omar was in when they made the decision to hire who's the other guys at there's another guy, Sam, that they hired not that long ago. Yeah, as like a performance guy. So I think you can put a lot of it down to that. And really, as I can gather it best of all, and I could go into a lot of detail on the specifics of this, at the end of the day, in their eyes, there's alignment between Omar, Wilcox, Amorim. It was his choice, his guy. They all are totally in agreement there. and they just felt that Dan Ashworth doesn't fit what they wanted, the way that they view the team, the way they view the players, the way they view recruitment, the way they view the academy. And it was it's a monumental mistake. Look, that's just the reality of it. It was 100% a mistake. And look, at the end of the day, the truth is the less Sir Jim, Sir Dave are making any football decisions, the better, right? In an ideal world, you give it to a football CEO like Omar Barada, and you judge him based off of how well he does with his appointments, with his hirings, with his firings, with his recruitment, with everything that the team that he puts together. In the same way that often Ed Woodward gets judged for how we performed, because that was essentially the job he was doing, right, for the most part.
Is he on gardening leave now again?
Who's that?
Oh,
Ashworth. Is he going to be back doing potatoes?
I'd have a greenhouse and some ultraviolet lights with a few.
The biggest garden in England at this point. Yeah.
And yes, we would be growing all kinds of exotic flowers. Who do you think we should replace him? I was thinking a scarecrow.
I don't think anybody. I'm not actually sure they will replace him with anybody at this point. The other factor is I don't know that
are outstanding in their field.
God, that's really stupid. No, just kidding. No, it's all good. I'm not sure it will be anybody. From the early conversations I've had, I wouldn't be surprised. They already got Vavell, who's a recruitment guy. They already got Wilcox, who was a director at Southampton. Then they hired this other guy, Sam, who's a performance director. They already kind of have a lot of people in place. Omar is obviously very experienced. He's not just a money guy. We know he knows football and deals with football at this point regularly. I don't know that they need anybody. I don't know that they think they need anybody. And in some ways, it'd be better to be a little lean and be all in perfect alignment than it would be to just hire someone for the sake of it. You know what I mean? You go hire like Berta from Atletico Madrid. How does he fit into this? Do you know that he's going to be a better, person? Is he someone you want to hand responsibility to? You don't. It's hard to know that.
So this is where I have concerns, because every single hire that you make, I understand lower level ones, they can end up overlapping, and you can, okay, we don't need two people for this position. But Dan Ashworth was brought in for a very specific role that was integral to the vision of INEOS. And I don't understand, if you're bringing in someone at that level who requires supposedly unique expertise in their position, that then you find out that, their duties that we assign them with can easily be covered by other people who aren't necessarily visionaries in that particular area, but can do them. Did your vision change? Did your concept change? Because Dan Ashworth has a very specific, identifying attribute, or very specific set of skills that give you a clear indication of what someone wants to do. They want to build a structure that's similar, self-sustaining, that has, a lot of the good parts of what the clubs that he worked at, which was essentially Brighton, where he made his name. Okay, so is that vision now changed? Have United now decided that we no longer want someone of that caliber having this level of influence? Or because if they don't hire somebody of similar, then what has changed? Because how could that position be absolutely integral, 6 months ago, but now is eliminated? I can understand lower level stuff, but it's like saying, okay, we needed a striker 6 months ago, but now we're just going to phase that out. We don't need one. Like, this is a very specific position with a very specific skill set that is, commensurate with your vision. Now what?
Well, I would just argue. I mean, look, if I want to be frank about it, I think a lot of people might consider that in most corporations, a lot of managers are unnecessary, right?
You're bang on, of course.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But
look, and all I'm saying is I think that's probably part of it, okay? I think there's a lot of people who are overpaid to do fuck all in a lot of jobs in big companies and expensive places and things like that. I think that, part of it is guys like part of it is probably that once you're in there and you get it, you can see that maybe you don't need it. You just don't. And that guys like Jason Wilcox, I mean, does Jason Wilcox actually have less experience? Is Man City and Southampton smaller than Brighton? I wouldn't say so. I would say that Jason.
Wrong, James.
What's that?
He won in those jobs long though.
No, for sure. But if you take his experience there in terms of the academy and these things where he has had a track record, and you bump him up, and you have this guy Vavel who does have a hell of a lot of recruitment experience in Germany, mind you, but for these major German clubs that have done a lot of worldwide recruitment and things like that, maybe that is all you need in that case. You know, Darren Fletcher, for example, is somebody who is mostly on the coaching area, but potentially now could move up. I would suggest to take something like the technical director position, given that he's staying on. I'm just looking at, you might go
Yeah.
vertical, right? Move some people up to absorb these positions and then hire more down below. And it's cheaper and it's less risky in that way to do it. And I would suggest that might be the route that they go, that you move Vivel and Wilcox up, you move Darren Fletcher up off of the training ground and onto the technical director role. And then you might hire another pathways person or some ex-player to come in and work with the young guys and stuff like that, because that's easy to do. That's easy work.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
A big part of a job in any company is self-preservation and making yourself look integral. Okay. If I'm Dan Ashworth, especially if I was a big part of the reason why Ten Hag was still at the club, I am making sure that I am an integral part of hiring Ruben Amorim so that the club doesn't go, we don't want to sack the guy that was a big part of bringing this guy in. You know, because it's going to be, tumultuous upheaval for Ruben. It shows once again the instability and decisiveness of the club. I would have inserted myself in that process, and if I'd have been removed from it, I would have known then what's coming next, right? Like you said.
Yeah.
Okay. And I most definitely would not have been on holiday on a second day. I'd been like, you know what? I'm making sure, because this guy's going to be here for a while. And some of my securities dependent upon my relationship with him.
Yeah.
Because if they're, I want them to think of me if do we want to sack that Ashworth? Maybe we don't want to piss off Ruben Amorim.
Yeah.
But he didn't. I mean, I said he was isolated before that. And maybe.
But you'd think you'd want to
Yeah, well, I was still do it. I'm like, okay,
like, I screwed up. Let me do something to make myself valuable. Yeah.
Because sometimes people that have made a decision will reverse it. Okay, show an initiative, but to me, like, there's some.
That's why you can't take the blame away from him on this a lot, because the behavior is odd. It's like he was expecting it and waiting for it rather than doing something about it, which
I'm pretty sure if you spoke to him, he would probably say things like, it was never made clear to me what my job actually was, and this is exactly what I mean, James, but having a very, very clear definition of success to people and what it means to be successful in their job and what it means to fail. And this is something that a lot of companies lack. And in fact, a lot of companies incentivize employees for success that is orthogonal to the interests of other people, and they end up competing. So what is success in sales may not be success in accounts, so, I need to give this guy 60 days to get us an account. Account's like, no, we're going after 30 because I'm incentivized to get money paid within 30 days. And then you have competing interests within a company. And that's not possible. So that's why alignment is difficult to accomplish, but you have to have when you bring people into a company, especially at that level, they're what's expected of them has to be precise.
Yep.
And so for me, it sounds to me like he never. United hired someone that thought he was something else, and he wasn't. But to me, that was obvious. He wasn't the transfer guru.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That to me, what it tells the players once again is just there's massive instability at the football club.
For sure.
There's no, there's still really zero progress from an organizational perspective. From what we've had before, if Woodward had acted like this, he'd get rightfully slaughtered.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons why you're paid the money you're paid is because your judgment, your ability to be able to make judgment calls based on your experience and your knowledge that other people can't make. And this once again just looks like chaos to me. But
for sure. And look,
one last point. I think it was
yeah,
coincidental that they did it a month before or 4 weeks before the window.
no, because specifically part of look without how do I put this? How do I put this right? Because I don't want to that, like I said, I don't want to dump everything on trying to blame an individual, right? Even Dan Ashworth in this case, because I think at the end of the day, 99% of things is that people just don't fit together, right? And one of the things that was specifically told to me is that the assessments of United's current squad and the transfer profiles that they'd want to build for Amorim to build the team that he wants are just incongruent with how Dan Ashworth sees things. And it makes sense. It's not his manager. It's not the guy he wanted to hire. It wasn't. So there's something about how Amorim plays, what he wants to do, that wasn't appealing to Dan Ashworth. So how is he going to recruit players for that profile? He's not. He's not gonna. He's not gonna see the same. He's not gonna see the players at the squad the same way, and he's not gonna see players outside the squad the same way. That's why there has to be alignment from top to bottom. So I think that is not even slightly accidental. I think it's 100% of another drive. Like we said, another driving factor beyond the Ten Hag thing. A driving factor in this is that he's obviously not going to be helpful for the transfer business that they want to do. And so, no, I think that is probably the presiding issue at the moment in terms of time. That look, if they want to look at who to sell in January, and they're saying, and Wilcox is saying, okay, I've spoken with Ruben, and I would like us to sell. I'll just pull a name out, somebody that we're definitely not going to sell. I would like us to sell Manuel Ugarte. And then Dan Ashworth says, no, I want to keep him. Well, how's that going to work now? Right. And then who are you going to go with?
Yeah.
If he wasn't close to the manager, like you said, and he didn't make an effort to get close to the manager, and wasn't involved in his hiring, then you have to throw his opinion out the window, but then he's useless. Then he's just useless in that respect. And that's the presiding issue at this point. I think that they really want to be very decisive, and I don't want to use the word ruthless, but ruthless on this front, which hopefully they are, given how they're acting elsewhere. And they need to have agreement on all fronts on that in this respect to get where they need to be.
I agree with this is an organization. I'm not losing any sleep over Dan Ashworth.
Yeah.
He's walking away as a wealthy guy. There's lots of low-level employees at United who have walked away in much more difficult situations. So I'm not, and I wasn't a massive fan of him coming in the first place. I remember talking to you about it on here I was like, I don't understand what you're trying to emulate at Brighton, at Manchester United. And that little bit concerns me. I think there's certain things you can learn from how it's run, but when you're trying to sign players of a Brighton caliber at Man United, that would concern me. And that's where his expertise in it lay, was in getting players and contacts for players of that particular level. So to me, it's going to be interesting to see how United proceed if they end up replacing this position and who they replace that person, who they bring in.
Yep.
But I mean, to me, James, it's sure. I know they're going to get things wrong. I accept that. But if you're going to be completely ruthless with your staff, you have to make sure that you are providing them with everything they possibly need to be successful. Otherwise, you have to have some sort of leeway to say, okay, we shouldn't expect them to be at this level yet because we're not giving them the things that they need to be at that level.
Yep.
So, yeah, well, we'll see.
My hope is, just on the final point on that, my hope is in the long term that we have obviously less decisions being made by people who aren't qualified to make them. That's what we've always wanted as well. In the end, if your CEO is running the business and they're the right person and they're experienced, that's the right way. That's what you want. The less people who are not in the business and who are not knowledgeable of it influence it from the board level, the better. And that's true of every single business on earth. I promise you that. So that's hopefully they have the right guy there. I'm kind of taking it in a pre-Omar, post-Omar era, even in that respect, and saying, okay, are the decisions that Omar Barada is taking correct? Are they working out or not? And passing a little more judgment based on that. And hopefully there's more weight put into that at this point in time, because you're better off, I think, trusting him than anybody else that you have, and definitely I'd rather trust him than Sir Dave Brailsford, something like that when it comes to football matters. So that's my hope anyway, and hopefully that's how they approach it.
All right, matey. We're gonna just try to start doing these live maybe
Yes.
next week, but within the next couple of weeks once we get everything sorted. So hopefully that makes it easier for people. I strongly encourage you go check out the Jim Ratcliffe interview in the United We Stand fanzine. Remember, support our fanzines are very, very important. You can subscribe to UWS online through their app if you're not local. I'm a subscriber. I get it delivered to my phone every month, and it is honestly probably the best one, informative, insight, gossip, knowledge magazine or content that you can consume with Manchester United, and also, of course, Red News as well. It's a fantastic fanzine that you should support, that are the lifeblood of the football club. Anything else, mate, before we go?
That's it for today.
Okay, matey. And we will be back next week. And hope you all have a safe week. Hopefully, by the time we speak next week, United will have the Bilson on Thursday. We need to play next weekend. City.
Is it City next week? I feel like we have a different one, but City's coming.
I thought it was City. Let me see.
Yeah, it is City actually. Yeah, no, you're correct. Yeah, we have the City on Sunday.
Down Ashworth, yeah, on my brother. No. Big week for United. So by the time we speak next week, we will hopefully be talking about 2 victories, which would be great. I'm telling you, City are there for the taking if United had a team that was capable of doing it. But
yep.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks, folks. Thanks for tuning in as always. Thanks for downloading the podcast. Follows, likes, retweets. Take it easy, Jimsy.
See you later.
All the best, mate.